Hello, my name is Alexei. Would like to make a video by the title Theonomy Refuted, Part 1. And today I'm gonna mostly focus on who should be put to death according to the Old Testament. And before that, I'm gonna make a distinction about two types of theonomists. So let's first read 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4 to 5, verse 4 to 15. So 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 4 to 5. Such is the confidence that we have through Christ towards God, not that we are sufficient in ourselves to claim anything as coming from us, but our sufficiency is from God, who has made us sufficient to be ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. Now, if the ministry of death, craved in the letters on stone, came with such glory that the Israelites could not gaze at Moses' face because of its glory, which was being brought to an end, was not the ministry of the Spirit have even more glory? For if there was glory in the ministry of condemnation, the ministry of righteousness must far exceed in its glory. Indeed, in this case, what once had glory has come to have no glory at all because of the glory that surpasses it. For if what was being brought to an end came with glory, much more will what is permanent have glory. Since we have such a hope, we are very bold, not like Moses, who would put a veil over his face, so that the Israelites might not gaze at the outcome of what was being brought to an end. But their minds were hardened. For to this day, when they read the Old Covenant, that same veil remains unlifted, because only through Christ it is taken away. Yes, to this day, whenever Moses is read, a veil lies over their hearts. So first group of theonomists, which at one point, how many years now? It was 2013. That's when I was kind of like, yeah, theonomy, let's do some Christian reconstructionism. You know, let's read some Puritans, how it should be done. But in reality, I would call those theonomists, and there's a very, very few theonomists. Actually, I only know modern uh, theonomists who would align with English Puritans, John Calvin, a bunch of others, is Brian Schwartley. So, like I said, some theonomists are ministers of death, and I would call them ministers of death. I would try to distinct them who are willing to put to death. They would change few things in the Old Testament. Ministers of death, for example, are John Calvin, for example. Instead of burning Servetus or stoning Servetus to death, he changed to beheading, cutting off his head. So technically, with some false prophet should be put to death by stoning, but John Calvin, like I said, he would change few things in the Old Testament. He would subtract stoning, but he would add beheading by the sword. So the ministers of death, for example, are John Calvin, English Puritans in the North America around 16th to 19th century. Manifest Destiny, for example, that's one of the highlights examples where some Puritans would twist Old Testament passages and would say, well, since the Native Americans, well, at least some Native Americans would not obey us, so we have the right to kill them. Because they would, like I said, they would compare English colonies and then later United States to Israel, and voila, you have the right to kill Indians if they don't become Christians and surrender their lands, in some cases. So, and like I said, modern example that I actually see who is actually consistent today is Brian Schwartley. Then the second group, first I'm gonna read the second group of so-called theonomists. I would read from Matthew 15, verse 1 through 9. So Matthew 15, then Pharisees and scribes came to Jesus from Jerusalem and said, why do your disciples break the traditions of the elders? For they do not wash their hands when they eat. He answered them, and they do, why do you break the commandments of God for the sake of your tradition? For God commanded, honor your father and your mother, and whoever reviles father or mother must surely die. But you say, if anyone tells his father or mother, what you would have gained from me is not given to is given to God, he need not honor his father. For the sake of your tradition, you have made void the word of God. You hypocrites! Well did Isaiah prophesy of you when he said, "This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of man." So the point, like many today, it's more of a majority. I would call them man-made traditionalists. I easily could say pharisaical theonomists who they are change or misinterpret many Old Testament passages. They would change death punishments for something else, like prison time or a fine. They would mix Old Testament with the New, especially when it comes to the Sabbath. Modern example is Joel McDorman. So they would claim that we are theonomists, we would not add or subtract, from God's law. Who would teach us to break one of the list of these commandments should be least in the kingdom. But once you start analyzing their stances, their positions, I'm like, you clearly changing. Like for example, like example right there in Matthew 15. If you're not honoring your father and mother, guess what? You should be stoned to death. I mean, but they would say, well, you know, maybe like a prison time or, you know, so maybe forced labor or time and, something else. Let's change a few things around. apply some uh, I wish I would write this down. The like Christian Reconstructionist was name equity, some general equity. I think it was a general equity. We would not go word for word what is commanded in the Old Testament. We would use a general equity. We would change some of the things. So that's why I would call them man-made traditionalists. They would change lots of things. They would ignore lots of things. Talking to them, they almost don't even acknowledge that, like, for example, false prophets. I'll give you example, like Mormons, Roman Catholics, Buddhists, Jehovah Witnesses, Muslims. They should be put to death according to the Old Testament. But they're like, well, it's they would come up with like a long, multiple page explanation. It's, well, we're in a new covenant now. Let's not put somebody to death. Let's just make some fun. It's just like reading it. It's just like like twisting God's word instead of looking at, and it's just like, hey, those people should be put to death. But no, they would be, well, no. Or this one fellow, actually, in the church that I attend in Colorado Springs, is like totally denied that false prophets should be put to death. I'm just like, I mean, it's just, that's why I make a distinction between those two groups, so at least accurately represent that there is some theonomists whom I would call ministers of death. For example, modern example would be Brian Schwartley, and man-made traditionalists like Joel McDermott, who would substitute a lot of things. So let's continue on. One of the biggest things that theonomists, they would accuse, yet, well, like I said, that many of them would, they say, you not obeying God's commandments if you believe in if like, for example, I'm a Arminianist, partial prayerist. I was a modified two kingdom doctrine, that whatever government does, we'll praise that we would live a peaceful and tranquil life. We would evangelize to them. If some people in the government, okay, whatever, I would not like push them. You have to have nothing to do with that. There's so many two kingdom doctrines, people would say that, but I'm kind of like, it is what it is. I would not like, would not say you in sin if you're police, you in sin if you're military. I definitely would disagree with that. Like I said, that's why I would say modified two kingdom doctrine. I would not encourage nor discourage to be somebody in a government, police force, military, whatever. It's up to the Lord. I mean, it's up to them and their personal relationship with the Lord. Some of the things God may call them, and some Christians God may not call them into. So, but going back to theonomists cannot add or take away from the old covenant with Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 4 verse 1 and 2. And now, O Israel, listen to the statutes and the rules that I am teaching you, and do them, that you may live and go in and take possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You shall not add to the word that I command you, nor take away from it, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God, that I commanded you. Deuteronomy 12, verse 32. Everything that I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to it or take from it. Numbers chapter 15, verse 37 through 40. The Lord said to Moses, speak to those people of Israel, and tell them to make tassels on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and to put a cord of blue on the tassels of each corner. And it shall be a tassel for you to look at, and remember all the commandments of the Lord, to do them, not to follow after your own heart or your own eyes, which you are inclined to whore after. So you shall remember and do all my commandments, and be holy to your God. So once again, the biggest thing with theonomists, they would say, you should not take the word of God. You should not change. You should not add or subtract. But they do exactly the same thing, or at least most of them. That's why I distinct between theonomists who are ministers of death, who actually were trying to or used to, especially like because today, like I said, I would call them real theonomists, the ministers of death, are very, very few. Most of the so-called professing theonomists are man-made traditionalists who claim that they would implement God's law within the United States, but in reality, when you start examining them, they don't even stand anything to it. But in regards to what I believe, like I said, I used to be theonomist or trying to, like, yeah, it's really true. Yeah, it's either God's law or what's called or anarchy. Stuff like that. I mean, they very crafty use twisting the Bible. But the point is that today I believe that this change of the covenant, the priesthood, the law, and the commandments has changed. So let's look at it. Hebrews chapter 8, verse 4 through 13. Now, if you were on earth, you would not be a priest at all. He would not be priest at all, since there are priests who offer gifts according to the law. They were a copy and shadow of the heavenly things. For when Moses was about to erect the tent, he was instituted by God, saying, since that you make everything according to the pattern that was shown you on the mountain. But as it is, Christ has obtained a ministry that is much more excellent than the old, as the covenant he mediates is better, since it is enacted on better promises. For if their first covenant had been faultless, there would have been no occasion to look for a second. For he finds fault with them when he says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will establish a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. For they did not continue in my covenant, so I showed no concern for them, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant which I have made with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my laws in their minds, and write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. And they shall not teach each one his neighbor and each one his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will be merciful towards their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more. In speaking of a new covenant, he makes the first one obsolete. And what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. Well, I mean, I know that they would distinct between the law on three parts, which I used to do myself: moral, judicial, and ceremonial. And they would say, well, the ceremonial law, yeah, it's been fulfilled in Christ, but the other laws are still ought to be kept. Well, I would disagree. I would say you cannot add or subtract from the old covenant. I would say that according to the Hebrews 7:12, for when there is a change in the priesthood, there is necessarily a change in the law as well. With the new covenant, the new priesthood came in. Everybody in a new covenant, every Christian is now the priest of God. And also the law has changed. And one of the many of the new commandments within a new covenant is that disciples would love one another. And especially it says, my disciples, that all people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. It's not like all people will know that you are my disciples if you put to death witches, homosexuals, and a bunch of other people. And I would say that Apostle Paul redefined, even like used the Old Testament to redefine, like instead of putting somebody to death, like in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, a man who was sleeping with his mother, they would just excommunicate him, and then according to the 2 Corinthians, when he repented, they allow him to return to the fellowship. So going back to the so now we're gonna look at it. Who shall be put to death according to the law of Moses? It's kind of extended list, that's why I'm gonna make multiple parts to refute theonomy. But let's analyze who shall be put to death in the old covenant according to the law of Moses. Exodus 21 verse 12. Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. So of course a murderer. So murderer. Exodus chapter 21 verse 15. Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. So I would call him strikers of parents, call them that. Exodus 21 verse 16. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and everyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. Kidnappers and slavers. It's interesting things that what's called many southern I guess pastors, preachers would almost like make it slavery as a, like, slavery is biblical, yes, but American slavery was not like biblical Old Testament slavery. There was not year of Jubilee, which is interesting things that Northerners would sing about in their Civil War song when Johnny comes marching home, the year of Jubilee. But of course, there was no year of Jubilee ever established in the South. But and of course, it was based on color too. Of course, there was similar thing to a slavery, to like poor white farmer boys, where a father would give their child to what's some to a rich farmer or plantation owner, where he worked multiple years, not as 7 years, but more than 7 years, and then yes, he would be, I would say, free man. But so it was more based. You have to say, yeah, it was based on color. There was poor whites who almost were like a slaves, who've been given almost like a slavery in the South. But then there was, of course, black slaves who were black, and they were in many cases slaves for life, and there was no year of jubilee. Yes, there was in some instances that their master granted freedom to them, but it's very few between. But ultimately, there was also white slave kidnappers and enslavers who would take black free men. For example, if you heard or read the book or saw a movie, 10 Year a Slave, it's actually, there was quite a few instances where people would kidnap a free black man from the north and sell him in the south. But but just, it's for the FYI, if you are a southern preacher and trying to kind of say, it's never slaves had. There was some instances, yes, like Uncle Tom's Cabin. If you read it, there was instances of I would say gracious slave master, and there were some cruel slave masters. The same thing as a 10-year slave. There's a gracious slave master, and there is a cruel slave master. So, but it was not a biblical slavery. There was no year of jubilee, which technically, I mean, you can argue about, like, for example, what's the name, a proclamation. It was more of making ultimately everybody a slave within the United States. What's the name? But let's just call it. Let's not go into conspiracy theories, at least for now. I mean, because it's like I would specifically focus on how I call this. On, at least on paper, we are free. Here we go. At least, well, I mean, in reality, to some degree, we are a free nation. There's many free in the United States, even though they would say that this whole Emancipation of Proclamation was more of a transferring ownership of slaves to the federal government instead of state government, which is, I understand, like you can make a case for it, but at the same time, let's just focus on unbiblical slavery which was going on in the South, which you cannot say, well, yeah, Bible teaches slavery is okay. I agree, but the problem is that you trying to equate American slavery of till pretty much mid 19th century to the Bible, which is not. It's not the same. There was no year of Jubilee. I mean, even if the owner would free them after 20 years of service, still it's not a biblical slavery. But let's continue on. Exodus 21:17. Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. So, blasphemers. So blasphemers of parents should be put to death, or cursers. I'm not sure how to spell curses. Forgive me if I misspell it. Cursers. Let's try it. There we go. Cursers of parents. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the path, and its owner has been warned, but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner also shall be put to death. So, I know, like for example, I think it was Brian Schwartley. Forgive me if I misunderstood or don't remember who specifically said, but let's just say a dog would attack somebody for the first time and bite somebody, and the dog, what's called, should be put to death. But then let's say this dog was known for attacking but haven't killed somebody, but then one day this owner led this dog in a yard, and the dog would attack somebody and would kill them. The owner and the dog should be put to death, because there's not many ox goring to death today, because unless of course if you want to apply like farms, which I'm not quite sure, but pretty much general equities that would trying to use application. But it's interesting that if you use general equity, you can apply literally to the dog, especially like German shepherds or pit bulls, whatever. And if the dog is known for biting people, attacking other people, but have not yet killed somebody, but then later on in life this dog kills somebody, then the dog and the owner should be stoned to death. And of course they would try to change it to, instead of stoning to death, let's just use firing squad or lethal injection or whatever to, I guess, kill a dog and the owner and stuff. So irresponsible ox owner. What is it? So ox owner. Next, if a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make his wife. If her father utterly refuse to give him to her, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. So this one is interesting. So the guy committed a fornication with a virgin, and the bride price, yeah, it was high. It was high. But the problem is this: later on, we're gonna talk about specifically more of a rape case of a virgin who is not betrothed, which is pretty much a little bit over a daily wage. So let's just say, and on top of it, bride price in today's American United States society, there's no such thing. But if theonomists will be honest, the fornicators would not be put to death, but they would pay high price for fornication. But continue on. That's actually in the future. Like once we get to Deuteronomy, I'm gonna talk about that cross reference because bride price. Honestly, like I looked at it, like for example, the slave of Abraham paid a high price for Rebecca for his son Isaac, but in some other cases, for example, David, not being a king but being one of the soldiers of Saul. Saul asked for 100 foreskins of Philistines. Then you have in Book of Joshua where one of the soldiers killed a king. I think it was a king. Killed a king, and voila, he had a wife because of that. So the bride price, I would say it's up to the father ultimately. So, but continue on. That's why I would, but I acknowledge, but I'm just want to acknowledge and also confront some of the theonomies that they would be like, well, it's a $200,000. Well, there's like if you look at the bride's price, like I said, throughout the Bible, especially Old Covenant, it varies. You cannot just say, hey, Rebecca's bride's price was this, therefore, let's just say $500,000. I would even say more than $500,000 that the slave of or servant of Abraham gave to the parents of Rebecca. So, but continue. Let's continue on. You shall not permit a sorcerer to live. So, what is the sorcerer, you might ask? Because that's a really good question. I myself was like looking at who is the sorcerer. So let's look at interlinear Bible. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Live or sorcerer. Witchcraft. Well, technically Daniel was a sorcerer too. I don't know if you knew that, but by force he was made to be one. But that's Kashaf. The prime root. Should we go back? Let's. I mean, you can use, for example, John Gill or Expositor's Bible, Matthew Henry, and define who it is. but it's pretty much those who practice magic or witchcraft or sorcerer. Um, to practice witchcraft or sorcery, use witchcraft, sorcerer, sorceress. So let's just say all magicians in the circus should be put to death. All I call them palm readers, fortune tellers should be put to death. Um, so we have sorcerers, witchcraft, of course. Yeah, I even argue the case that people who participate in Halloween should be put to death if you're a theonomist, which, like I said, I'm no longer is. So let's just say sorcerers. Just make it sorcerers. Whoever lies with animals shall be put to death. So I forgot the technical zoophobia. Animal. It's pretty much people who have sex with animals should be put to death. Continue on, and like I said, to me, yeah, Theonomists would. Is it unjust? Is it unjust? They would just play like a regular. Is it unjust? I'm like, no, it's perfectly just. But the problem is that you are picking just few verses out of the Bible. You're not gonna talk about Sabbaths. Like I said, most of the Theonomists are man-made traditionalists. They're not the ministers of death for most of the part. There's only very few. Like I said, the biggest ones that I know is a Brian Schwartley. The rest of them is just, I just call them hogwash, man-made traditionalists. They're not the real deal. But so okay, people who have sex with animals. Next one. Exodus 31 verse 14 to 15. You shall keep the Sabbath because it is holy for you. Everyone who profanes it shall be put to death. Whoever does any work on it, that soul shall be cut off from among his people. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath on the solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. And let me read Exodus 35 verse 2. 6 days work shall be done, but the seventh day you shall have a Sabbath of the solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on it shall be put to death. Is it just? Absolutely. Old Testament, God can do whatever he wants. If a man gathers sticks on the Sabbath, would say, amen, he should be put to death. But we're in a new covenant. We're under the new law of Christ. We're under new commandments. And, many so-called theonomists, they would say, well, actually, let's just use John Bunyan, for example. Of course, Puritans did not like Baptists, and they imprisoned John Bunyan. It's interesting that when I was coming out Theonomy, I found out that actually it was not Roman Catholics who imprisoned John Bunyan. It was actually Puritans, the Protestants, who imprisoned John Bunyan. But interesting thing is that Sabbath, according to the Old Covenant, starting on Friday night till Saturday night, from sundown till sundown. But the interesting thing, if you're gonna impose on people within United States, especially if you're in Alaska, during the winter time, the days are short. During the summertime, the days are long. So it would be very confusing when a person starts the Sabbath keeping, because there was no watch. There was a watch, but there was a sun watches. There was not like time set. What time would we say is it 7 p.m. or 8 p.m.? Like in some states, sunset varies. You know, like I said, Alaska. I'm not sure if Alaska have like. Probably should have researched. Pretty much sure that they have white nights. White night is pretty much like more than 24-hour in whole day. You can see some kind of sunlight, or it doesn't. The light is still there. That you, it may be somewhat dark, but still there's a light. Like in Russia, where I lived in Severodvinsk, there was multiple weeks of white nights where the night pretty much you always daytime. So the question is that how those Sabbath keepers would change from Friday evening to Saturday evening to a Sunday, the first day. And of course they would say, well, it's a new covenant now, we're in the New Testament. But notice, Sabbath keeping, it was part of one of the big 10 commandments. And you would have to say that moral law of God has changed, or at least today has changed. And on top of this, it's actually like a few months ago I found out synagogues was not there. Like I looked at so many passages about synagogues, but I couldn't find it. It's not there. So when the synagogues came around, actually when Alexander the Great conquered uh, Israel and many other countries, and he would try to make all the cultures Greek-like. That's when synagogues came about. Syn in Greek is combined, I think it's combined, and agoge is a school. Like think of this, agoge in Sparta was a military school. Pedagogue, we have, I wouldn't, it's equalized to a teacher, because pedagogue is more of a slave who would enforce the rules and commands of the father over the son. So the point is that Sabbath keeping is definitely problematic for theonomists, because once again they would change the day, which is Friday night, to Saturday night, from sundown till sundown, Friday night sundown till Saturday night sundown. And if anybody know about geography, Israel is very close to sorry, I forgot the zero line, equator, very close to equator. So there was minor differences within a sun up and sun down. So the point is that they would have to change. They would have to come up with a man-made tradition saying, well, from let's just say 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. is a beginning, or they would say, hey, let's just say Sunday starting at 5 a.m. no work shall be done, nobody should work. And then, or they would make exception, like for example Brian Schwartley would say, you know, there's some exceptions, like for example people at the electric station, which supervise electricity within a city, would come, or paramedics or police officers. That would be exception. The rest should be in church. Well, once again, in guess what? In Old Testament, there was no such thing as a police, which I'm gonna talk later on. So continue. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 1 through 2. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to the people of Israel, any one of the people of Israel or of the strangers who sojourn in Israel, who gives any of his children to Molech, shall surely be put to death. The people of the land shall stone him with stones. And once again, some people would apply this passage to the abortion. Women who had abortion shall be stoned to death. And once again, they would change from stoning somebody to death to firing squad, hanging, or lethal injection, whatever. Because it's gonna be kind of hard to find people who would start stoning women who had abortion to death. But anyway, continue on. Leviticus 20, verse 10. If a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. So, adulterer and adulteress. Next, Leviticus 20, verse 11. If a man lies with his father's wife, he has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So, and I think honestly, like, since in the Old Testament, polygamy was not forbidden, it was actually regulated. So the problem theonomists would run into is that are they gonna allow polygamy? Because King David had multiple wives, Michael, then what's her name, Abigail, the widow of Nabal, and multiple other women. But so the point is that, I mean, in Old Testament, polygamy was not forbidden; it was regulated. So our theonomist friends, man-made traditionalists, or ministers of death, are they gonna forbid theonomy? I mean, polygamy or not? But this one is, like I said, interesting. Father's wife. Is that a mother or is it one of the wives? So, to some degree, let's just say if they forbid polygamy and it's a son and a mother, they would sleep with each other and both of them should be put to death. But how about 1 Corinthians chapter 5? How are you gonna say that? Well, let's just handle. Let the government, whom Theonomists trying to get into, put this person to death. It's almost like, honestly, like two examples. In one is a New Testament where the Jews handing over Jesus Christ and saying, well, we're not allowed to put nobody to death, but we're gonna push you, government. We're gonna push you, Pontius Pilate, that you would put this person to death. Or in the Old Testament, King David trying to covering up his sin and would write a letter to his commander Joab, saying like, hey, just put Uriah up in the front of the line and then withdraw and let Philistines to kill him. So King David in his mind is like, well, I didn't kill Uriah, but yet God counted the death of Uriah upon the hands of David. So what is gonna be? So is it you gonna? I mean, the whole concept is it's almost like mixture of state and the church. I would say that it's like the Book of Revelation describes as a spiritual prostitute riding a beast in the Book of Revelation. What Theonomy does that you have conflict of interest. Are you gonna go with Leviticus chapter 20 verse 11, or are you gonna go with the 1 Corinthians chapter 5, where a son will sleep with his mother, and instead of Paul writing, they shall be put to death, but all it was is that they would excommunicate this man until he repented. And once he repented, he was brought back. But continue on. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 12. If a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed perversion, their blood is upon them. If a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So homosexual males. Sexual males. And it's interesting that why I put down homosexual instead of putting down homosexuals, homosexual males, because honestly, I looked at it. Yes, if a woman lies with a woman, it's an abomination, but I don't see the command of lesbians being put to death. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it specifically applies to male sodomites who shall be put to death in an old covenant. And like I said, I don't believe that Christians should try to establish Mosaic law within the United States. But couple of Christians, I remember it was Steven Anderson on TV, he's like, yeah, homosexuals should be put to death, we just advise to the government. Honestly, I would not advise to the government anything. I would just say, look, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. Christ's mission and the church mission should be in a business of saving people, not advising who should be put to death. Because once again, they would use this Leviticus 20:13 and say, yeah, homosexuals should be put to death. But then 1 Corinthians chapter 6, among some of the people who were homosexuals actually got saved. They became Christians. Notice this. Where is it? But you yourself, or do you not know that the unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God? Don't be deceived, neither the sexually immoral, nor idolatrous, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuals, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you. So there were some Christians now at that time who were homosexuals, but God justified them. God washed them by the Holy Spirit and changed their hearts and minds. So, I believe that Christians should evangelize to homosexuals. And like I said, to me, let the rulers of this world figure out what they want to do. Christians should be in a mission of saving people, not advising government what to do, who should be put to death. Because let's look at this list again. Look at it's not only what's called not only it equates like to what's called homosexuals, but also notice idolaters, the greedy, the drunkards. How, especially like drunkards, like um, I believe that drinking alcohol is a liberty. In fact, I would actually believe that communion should be served as wine, not a grape juice. But the question is this: how much is too much? What you would equate somebody who's exercising his liberty versus um, a drunkard. So continue on. Just something to think about it. Continue on. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 14. If a man takes a woman and her mother Elsa, it is depravity. He and they shall be burned with fire. Then there may be no depravity among you. And notice, capital punishment for this is that they should be burned with fire, not a firing squad, not a lethal injection, not a hanging, not using a guillotine. None of this thing is burned with fire, like in medieval times, like Inquisition style. So, I mean, I, I try not to making like these generalizations about people, but in the South, there is couple of few cases where a man would let's just say had fornication with a daughter and a mother, and all three of them shall be burned with fire. But continue on. If a man lies with Leviticus chapter 20 verse 15, if a man lies with an animal, he shall surely be put to death, and you shall kill the animal. So once again, zoophobes or whatever you want to call them, not only just man should be put to death, but also an animal as well. Let's continue on. If a woman approaches any animal and lies with it, you shall kill the woman and the animal. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So, zoophobes. I'm not sure how to spell it, but let's just call them male and female zoophobes. Sorry if I misspelled it, but you get the picture. Leviticus chapter 20 verse 17. If a man takes his sister, a daughter of his father, or a daughter of his mother, and sees her nakedness, and she sees his nakedness, it is disgrace, and they shall be cut off in the sight of the children of their people. He has uncovered his sister's nakedness, and he shall bear his iniquity. An interesting thing is that it says be cut off. They shall be cut off. And honestly, is it looks like it's a death penalty, but at the same time, nakedness, where is it? She shall be cut off. Cut off of a body part, cut out, eliminate, kill, cut a covenant. I mean, it does seem like a put somebody to death, but to some degree, is that just being kicked out from the Israel? It's hard to tell. I mean, I looked it up. If you are a theonomist and you study the Bible, please let us know. Should they get killed, or should they get kicked out from among Israel? So like High Kolama. Once again, going back to South, there's some, what's his name, incest going on between, you know, um, between within the families and stuff. So let us know. Should they kicked out from the South, or should they kicked out from United States? Please explain. If a man lies with a woman during her menstrual period and uncovers her, he has made naked her fountain, and she has uncovered the fountain of her blood. Both of them shall be cut off from among their people. So, once again, cut off. Does that mean putting them to death? Or is it, they would say it's a ceremonial law, so since it's ceremonial, whatever, but once again, you cannot add or subtract from the Old Testament covenant. And since the system itself, this division of three types of laws, encourages on subtracting some of the commandments, like this one, for example, like man lying with a woman during her menstrual period. They would say most likely that that's a ceremonial law, but the problem is that the whole system is encourages to subtract from the law of Moses. But let's continue. Leviticus 20, chapter 20, verse 19. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your mother's sister or of your father's sister, for that is to make naked one's relative. They shall bear their iniquity. Once again, it's the language is like, seems like they should be put to death. But continue on. Leviticus 20:20. If a man lies with his uncle's wife, he has uncovered his uncle's nakedness. They shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. Interesting. It's no longer capital punishment, the incest within a family, but it's they shall bear their sin. They shall die childless. So it seems like that's God's curse upon them. Continue on Leviticus 20, verse 21. If a man takes his brother's wife, it is impurity. He has uncovered his brother's nakedness. They shall be childless. Like think of Herod. He took his brother's wife. But, so once again, it's God's curse, but it might not be done anything like to kill them. Let's continue on. Leviticus chapter 20, verse 27. A man or a woman who is a medium or a necromancer shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their blood shall be upon them. And let's look at Interlinear Bible. What is KJV translates familiar spirit, obi, hence necromancer, about spirit. So Denzel had so somebody who's talking to water skin battle, necromancer. Necromancer, one who invokes the dead, ghost, spirit of a dead. Practice of necromancer. Like, I'll give you example. Like, actually, it's in Russia, among Russian Orthodox people, it's common to go to someone's grave and put some vodka and some food on the grave and talk to the person. I just wonder if I'm not sure if it's around like within the United States, people like, do they go to the grave and talk to the a person like they're alive? I just wonder if it's been done, without vodka, maybe without food, but that's one of the ways talking to the dead people, at least in Russia, at least what I know. My grandma, she was Russian Orthodox Church. I remember one time we went to the uncle's, I think it was I think it was uncle's grave, or her, technically my grandfather's grave, and yeah, she put some. No, her father's grave. So it would be my great grandfather's grave. She went to and she would talk to him as he was alive, which is considered to be necromancy, I would say. So, just wondering if how the Theonomists would be willing to put such people to death, because I've seen a couple of pictures where people would go to the site where the grave of the loved one would be, and they would weep and mourn, and also they would talk. They would, at least they would attempt to talk to somebody who is dead. Is that considered to be a necromancy? And they should be stoned to death. Do not add or subtract. You do not subtract stoning this person to death and adding some other capital punishment like firing squad or hanging or whatever. Continue on. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him, the sojourner as well as the native. When he blasphemes the name, shall be put to death. And you know, I mean, there's so many ways people blaspheme God's name today. I hate to give examples, but I have to use it because I guess some of the preachers would almost like isolate themselves with dead man in their books, and would not really contact to nobody, because there's so many. I mean, like, there's so many blasphemers. Like, they would say God and DAMN, or Jesus, uh, use curse word F, and Christ. Those people, at least what I see from the Bible, should be put to death. And the question is to Theonomists, are you willing to implement that law? And like I said, that law was given to the nation of Israel, and we are under the new covenant. With the change of the priesthood, the law has also changed. Christians' priority not advise or putting somebody to death, but save the life, preach the gospel to them. So once again, that's, or would you willing to put like Mormons to death, because technically they are blaspheme the name of Jesus Christ. They claim to be Christians, but they teach false Christ. Continue on. Leviticus 24 verse 21. Whoever kills an animal shall make it good, and whoever kills a person shall be put to death. So once again, murderers should be put to death. One of the passages, interesting things that I call them a theonomist would twist or explain away is in Numbers chapter 15, verse 32 to 36. So let's read. While the people of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man gathering sticks on the Sabbath, and those who found him gathering sticks brought him to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation. They put him in custody because it has not been made clear what shall be done with him. And the Lord said to Moses, the man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside of camp. And all the congregation brought him outside the camp and stoned him to death with stones, as the Lord commanded Moses. And I know some of them be like, well, they would actually use modern day teachers to implement that this man was proud. He would, did it right in front of everybody. He just was daring and this and this. This is a speculation. It was addition using modern day preachers, where in a text there's nothing talks about his attitude, there's nothing talks about his motives. The man was gathering sticks, and guess what? He was put in custody, and then God, Yahweh, gave command to Moses that this man should be put to death, and all congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. And there was, once again, in the text, there's nothing about his motives or other things like, oh, he did it out of this or that. No, that's a speculation. Man was doing this, and God commanded to kill him. Let's continue on. This is, by the way, now we're going to talk about police and the blood avenger. Because in the New Testament, do not avenge yourselves, but leave it up to God. But it's interesting that in the Old Testament there was no police, which would for example, there was no police who would be like paid. I mean, there was elders and Levites, but Levites was not like police. So you cannot equate Levites and elders to police, modern day police officers. Continue on. Numbers chapter 32 verse 9 to 21. And the Lord said to Moses, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you cross the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall select cities to be cities of refuge for you, that the manslayer who kills a person without intent may flee there. The cities shall be for you a refuge from the avenger, that the manslayer may not die until he stands before the congregation for judgment. And the cities that you may shall be your 6 cities refuge. You shall give 3 cities beyond the Jordan, and the 3 cities in the land of Canaan to be cities of refuge. Those 6 cities shall be for refuge for the people of Israel, and for the strangers, and for the sojourner among them. And that everyone who kills any person without intent may flee there. But if he struck him down with an iron object so that he died, he's a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. And if he strikes down with a stone tool that he could cause death and he died, he's a murderer. Murderer shall be put to death. Or if he struck him down with a wooden tool that he could cause death and he died, he's a murderer. The murderer shall be put to death. The avenger of blood shall himself put the murderer to death when he meets him. He shall put him to death. And if he punished him out of hatred or hurled something at him, lying in wait so that he died, or in enmity strike him down with his hand so that he died, that he who struck the blow shall be put to death. He is a murderer. The avenger of blood shall put the murderer to death when he meets him. An interesting thing is that, so let's just say somebody working together at a construction site, and there was no hatred between co-workers, and let's just say this person dies, and this, especially in construction, I'm just wondering, like, if I call them, if theonomists, once again, they would have to say 6 cities within whole United States of America, or they're gonna say 6 cities in each state, because some states are much bigger than other. You cannot compare California and Texas, and then, like, let's just say Rhode Island, or Washington DC, or it's called Idaho, or Idaho, whatever, or North Dakota or South Dakota, because it's just, you have to say, once again, general equity, let's just do something similar but not the same. And once again, you have to add or subtract. And once again, later on I will talk about applications of the Old Testament within the New Testament, but since theonomists insist that they would say we should not add or subtract from the law of God, whoever teaches to break one of the least of my commandments shall be least in the kingdom of God. And I'm just like, look, you the one who is teaching, you the one who is adding and subtracting, you the one who teaches how to break one of the least of my commandments. Yahweh even says that most of them in modern day, the man-made traditions. They would say, well, let's just, instead of 6 cities in Rhode Island, we'll just make a 1 or 2, or like part of, I think it's a part of Rhode Island, whatever, New Jersey, whatever. Let's just say 1, or it's like some certain place. But then in Texas, instead of 6, we'll just make it 12 cities, for each side, north, south, west, and east, whatever. It's just ridiculous. But continue on. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 5 to 10. But that prophet or that dreamer of dreams shall be put to death, because he taught rebellion against the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you out of the house of slavery, to make you live the way in which the Lord your God commands you to walk, so you shall purge the evil from your midst. So now you have false prophet, chapter 13, who actually did perform the sign, but now he telling you let's 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 follow another god. Like, once again, Mormons, that's a great example right there. Mormons, they telling you to follow another Jesus Christ, another God. Well, I mean, they would kind of downgrade Jesus Christ to like one of the gods, but not the creator of heaven and earth, not a triune God. They would say something else. I would even say that Roman Catholics, they would teach quadra disun God, because they believe Father, Son, uh, Holy Spirit plus Mary, who would actually, the reason why Roman Catholics pray to Mary, because she can influence Jesus Christ, and by influencing Jesus Christ would cause disunity between him and the Father, according to Roman Catholic theology. So they would, I would say that Roman Catholics, not only they are doing idolatry, worshiping Mary, worshiping their priest by elevating him to a status of God, since they confess their sins and priest forgives them the sins that is done not against him but against ultimately God and against other people. So I mean, like those two examples. So like Muslims, that's another example. Like they may perform some kind of miracle, like let's just say Muhammad. Yes, he won many military battles, many military campaigns, but the problem is that he worships another god. They teach another god. So are theonomists willing to put Mormons, Muslims, Roman Catholics to death? I mean, besides like Roman Catholics, obviously in idolatry. Their whole religion is idolatry. But continue on. So besides false prophet who teaches to worship another god, let's look at now. So false god, false pro. Now we have family members. Deuteronomy chapter 13, verse 6 through 10. If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife you embrace, or your friend who is as your own soul entice you secretly, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, some of the gods of the peoples who are around you, whether near you or far off from you, from the one end of the earth to the other. You shall not yield to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him, nor shall you conceal him, but you shall kill him. Your hand shall be first against him to put him to death, and afterward the hand of all the people. You shall stone him with stones to death. You shall stone him to death with stones, because he thought to draw you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And notice this. It's I should have had a reference, but this one preacher in my church asked him about that passage from my head, but he would say there's just the nations. No, specifically talks about your brother, the son of your mother, or your son, or your daughter, or the wife you embrace, or your friend who is as your own soul entices you secretly. It was not like a public thing. It was secretly he was enticing. Imagine a wife entices a man saying his own husband. She would say, "Hey, honey, let's go to the mosque. Let's worship Allah." Or what's some Jehovah Witness? Well, let's go worship Jehovah. Well, I mean, and once again, which God are we talking about? Triune God, all sovereign. Since within the United States, uh, free willism, also called, which is called Arminianism, on high rising, and the question would be, which God is the true God? Please define it. Is what some the people are we just gonna say that, hey, as long as you believe in a triune God, at least on paper, you are fine? Or let's just define the Trinity? Or do we define uh, sovereignty of God? Or are we going to go and say what is idolatry and what is not idolatry? So the question to theonomists, but let's just say which most obvious one. A Muslims, uh, with some, well, once again, Mormons, but most of the Christians would say Muslims as, I mean, Mormons are like Christians, which they are not. But let's just say Muslims, are you willing to say that somehow, let's just say a Christian couple gets married, and after like 10 years of marriage, a wife would become a Muslim, and she would say to her husband secretly, "Hey, let us go and go to the mosque and worship Allah." I wonder how many husbands are willing to just stone, not just participate, but their hand shall be first to throw a stone at her to death. So, and so the point is that to theonomists, are they gonna willing to implement that? Let's continue on. The actually interesting thing is that in theonomy, you should be able to make wives by force from female prisoners of war. Like, for example, if a soldier of US Army goes to Iraq or Afghanistan, you should be able to capture a woman and make her a wife by force. So let's just read some of the passages in regards to that. Deuteronomy 21, verse 10 to 14. When you go out to war against your enemy and the Lord your God gives them into your hand and you take them captive. Notice this, it's not arbitrarily, it's specifically, and the Lord your God gives them into your hand and you take them captive. And you see among the captives a beautiful woman and you desire to take her to be your wife and you bring her home to your house. She shall shave her head and pare her nails, and she shall take off the clothes in which she was captured, and she shall remain in your house and lament her father and her mother a full month. After that, you may go in to her and be her husband, and she shall be your wife. But if you are no longer delight in her, you shall let her go where she wants. But You shall not sell her for money, nor shall you treat her as a slave, since you have humiliated her. So, specifically, the law, and notice once again, the Lord your God gives them into your hand. That's, it's not like, oopsie, I see one of you, you know, God allows. No, no, no. There's not actually, like, if you look at the whole Bible, there's not one sentence says God allows things. No. God gives or takes away. So if God, let's just say, gives Iraq or Afghanistan to United States, should not then soldiers to capture and make wives by force there, or any other country? Like, for example, in a Mexican-American war, what's the problem? Or think of a Spanish-American war where United States captured Philippines. Why not? Continue on. Numbers chapter 31, verse 1 through 17. Numbers 1 through 17. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, avenge the people of Israel on the Midianites. Afterward you shall be gathered to your people. So Moses spoke to the people, saying, arm men from among you from the war. Then they shall go among Midian to execute the Lord's vengeance on Midian. You shall send 1,000 from each tribes of Israel to the war. So there were provoked out of the thousands of Israel 1,000 from each tribe, 12,000 armed for war. The Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 from each tribe, together with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, with the vessels of the sanctuary and the trumps for the alarm in his hand. They warred against Midian as the Lord commanded Moses and killed every male. They killed the kings of Media with the rest of their slain, Evi, Rebik, Zur, Hur, and Reba, the 5 kings of Midian. And they also killed Balaam, the son of Beor, with the sword. And the people of Israel took captive the women of Media and their little ones, and they took as plunder all the cattle, their flocks, and all their goods, all their cities in the places where they lived, and all their encampments they burned with fire, and they took all the spoils along the plunder, both of men and of beasts. Then they brought the captives and the plunder and the spoils to Moses and the Eleazar the priest and the congregation of the people of Israel at the camp of the plain of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho. Moses and Eleazar the priest and all the chiefs of the congregation went up to meet them outside the camp. And Moses was angry with the officers of the army, the commanders of the thousands and the commanders of hundreds, who had come from service in the war. Moses said to them, have you let all the women leave? Behold, those on Balaam's advice caused the people of Israel to act treacherously among the Lord in the incident of Peor, and so the plague came among the congregation of the Lord. Now therefore, kill every male among the little ones, and every woman who had known man by lying with him. And actually, I kinda 31. There we go. I should have actually. Okay. Now therefore kill every male among the little ones, and every woman who has known man by lying with him, but all the young girls who have not known man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. And what does this mean? Notice, so all the males, all the little ones, little boys should be killed, and all the old women should be killed. Actually, non-virgins. Here we go. All the non-virgins should be killed, but then all the young girls who have not known men by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. So once again, forced wives, you can make forced wives out of virgins. And interesting thing is that it says young girls. So the question is how young they were. Where is it? It says all the women. Notice KJV translates Numbers 31:18. But all the women, children that have not known a man by lying with him, keep alive for yourselves. And the interesting thing is young or how old they were. And honestly, like it looks to me what's called young. Actually, I was looking up multiple places, but it seems to me it's about 12 and younger. So technically, in Old Testament, if you measure it by today's social statuses or by today's laws, they were pedophiles, 12 and under, or whatever. 18, let's just say American age is 18 and under, so technically they didn't even, most of them did not even reach the age of consent according to today's social laws, social United States laws. There we go. So continue on. Also, did you know that in the Old Testament polygamy was not sin, but it was regulated? Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 15 through 17. If a man has two wives, the one he loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and unloved have bore him children, and if the firstborn belongs to the unloved, then on the day when he assigns his possessions as an inheritance to his sons, he may not treat the sons of the loved as the firstborn in preference to the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn, but he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has, for he is the first fruit of his strength. The right of the firstborn is his. So once again, polygamy was not condemned in the Old Testament. It was regulated. Next one is a stubborn and rebellious son shall be put to death. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and those they discipline him will not listen to them, then his father or his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives, and they shall say to the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from our midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. So once again, it's stubborn and rebellious son who's lazy, drunkard, gluttonous, just stone him to death. You know, how many people we have today who just playing video games, huh? Huh? So, question to theonomists. Are you guys willing to do that? You know. Next, go on Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 13 to 21. If any man takes a wife and goes into her, and then hates her and accuses her of misconduct and brings a bad name upon her, saying, I took this woman, and when I came near her, I did not find in her evidence of virginity. Then the father of the young woman and her mother shall take and bring out the evidence of her virginity to the elders of the city in the gate. And the father of the young woman shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man to marry, and he hates her. And behold, he has accused of her misconduct, saying, I didn't find in her daughter evidence of virginity, and yet this is the evidence of my daughter's virginity. And they shall spread the cloak before the elders of the city. Then the elders of that city shall take the man and whip him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought a bad name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife, and he may not divorce her all his days. But if the thing is true, the evidence of virginity was not found in the young woman, then they shall bring out the young woman to the door of her father's house, and the man of her city shall stone her to death with stones, because she has done an outrageous thing in Israel by whoring in her father's house. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. The question is this: today in US society, since we're an industrialization era where the marriage is not looked upon as a more of a providing, I guess, way for a woman, but marriage more of a romantic, and on top of it, women who've been fornicating before marriage, they will not even think about marrying in the first place. I mean, it's almost like, to some degree, a husband would be able to control them by saying, look, I know you were not a virgin and you don't have no evidence. I can easily to put you to death. Or like in medieval times, when women were not virgins during their wedding night, they would actually put some blood of of chickens on their bed sheets, and voila, they're virgins. So all of a sudden now we're gonna have to do some forensic, criminal science stuff to find out, was it her blood, or was it her blood, from the womb, or was she just cut her blood, from the arm and pour it on a bed sheet. So, question to theonomists: how is it going to be, like, even in the modern day? Like, when are you guys gonna impose like a cut line? Like, say, hey, let's just say 2024. Some theonomists, let's just say, once again, let's just say Brian Schwartley, who is Minister of Death, at least most consistent theonomist, at least what I see, because other ones like Joel McDermott, Jeff Durbin, Doug Wilson, they just teaching man-made traditions using general equity thing. It's like, sorry guys, but the point is this: that what's the cut line? Because there's going to be lots of women should be put to death, and once again, you're going to have to change stoning her to death to a firing squad. Because how many people will you find that are willing to pretty much stone people to death? Next point. Not all rapists shall be put to death. Deuteronomy. So we continue. Notice it's continuation of the thought. So we have the same chapter right after. We see a fornicating wife who was fornicating before the marriage was caught in sin, and now she's facing the death sentence by stoning to death. And now we're going to address rapists, cases of rape. And one particular case are the Theonomists just almost trying to twist or overlook that. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22 to, let's just go verse by verse. Chapter 22, verse starting at verse 22. If a man is found lying with the wife of another man, both of them shall die, the man who lie with the woman and the woman, so you shall purge evil from Israel. If there is betrothed virgin and a man meets her in the city and lies with her, then you shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death with stones. The young woman, because she did not cry out for help, though she was in the city, and the man, because he violated his neighbor's wife. So you shall purge the evil from your midst. But if in the open country a man meets a young woman who is betrothed, and the man seizes her and lies with her, then only the man who lies with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the young woman. She has committed no offense punishable by death. For this case is like that of a man attacking and murdering his neighbor, because he has met her in the open country and thought the betrothed young woman cried out for help. There was no one to rescue her. But notice now, so betrothed women, if betrothed women are raped and they cry out, the man shall be put to death. If a man rapes a married woman, he shall be put to death. But notice this now, Deuteronomy 22 verse 20 8 and 29. If a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed and seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lay with her shall give the father of the young woman 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her. He may not divorce her all his days. Remember, we talked about Exodus 22, where man seduces her with words, and then he should give the bride's price, whatever amount father chooses. But then, but here is a specific amount of money, and it's in line with whatever it's been teaching, starting in verse 23, that that it talks about rape, and the specific rape of a virgin who is not betrothed, and whatever ages. Honestly, like some theonomists argue, let's put pedophiles to death. But honestly, I don't see that. I do not see that at all. I would say that in Old Testament, pedophilia is not condemned. Matter of fact, I would say, if a man meets a virgin who is not betrothed, and everybody technically starts off as unbetrothed, unless, of course, if you want to go back to like I forgot which country where they would, usually like Asian countries, where they would betroth somebody like at a super early young age. So, but notice this, that in Exodus, there was just a bride's price if a man seduces her with her words and stuff, versus here, if someone pretty much seizes her by force, it's a 50 shekels of silver. And I was looking at, actually I made a video previously, I think it was almost a year, more than a year ago. You have to look up the video. But the point is that 50 shekels of silver, and if you look at just how much is like a shekel, like 40 shekels, the daily ration was 40 shekels of silver during the Nehemiah day. I would even say about $200-300. And then a father has the right to choose whether this virgin who got raped, who was not betrothed, should get married to the rapist or not. Because in the Old Testament, marriage was viewed as a economical, not as a romantic thing. But continue on. Prostitutes in the Old Testament. Interesting thing is that prostitution, there's two types of prostitutions. One is a cold prostitution, and then there's just a regular prostitution. That it was not fully forbidden being a prostitute. Like, for example, in 1 Kings chapter 3, verse 16, the two prostitutes came to the king for the judgment. Two prostitutes came to King Solomon before he fell into idolatry. And then interesting thing is that, once again, there's a difference between being a cold prostitute and a prostitute. The one who is doing for, I guess, a living. Another one is doing to a false gods in a temple, false temple of gods. So, but once again, in the New Testament, prostitution is like, it's not it gives you a concept in the New Covenant, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 15 to 20. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ and make them members of a prostitute? Never! Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For it is written, the two will become one flesh. but he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God with God in your own body. So in Old Testament, the temple was a type or shadow of what God gonna do in a new covenant. But so yeah, something to think about, Theonomists. That's it for now, and in the future gonna make a couple of more videos refuting theonomy. But continue. That's it. Have a nice day. Bye bye.